The Raptors narrowly lose yesterday in a game to the Boston Celtics where if Fred VanVleet shows up in any capacity, they probably get over the line. And this is a bit of a theme for Fred VanVleet over the last 2 weeks. So in today's video, we're going to discuss if Fred VanVleet is the right point guard for this young core going forward. Let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? It's Jacob here, back with Amateur Hour TV, your source for the greatest coverage and analysis on the latest Toronto Raptors news. If you want to see more videos and content just like this, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Help me on my road to 13,000 subs, and check out our watch party. We do a live stream watch party for every single Raptors game. Hopefully see you tomorrow as the Raptors take on the Los Angeles Lakers. But also, if you find yourself enjoying this video along the way, be sure to drop a like. It does go a long way to supporting the channel. So today's video is going to be all about Fred VanVleet. In the last 2 weeks or so, we've had multiple players really in slumps for the Raptors here, and it is costing us some games. It's absolutely costing us some games. And yesterday, you could say that Fred VanVleet was part of the reason why the Raptors lost. And I would say a big reason why the Raptors lost in this one, because he shoots very poorly from the field. 3 for 14, only goes 1 for 6 on three-pointers, misses a wide open corner three late in the game that would have been a key three-pointer as the Raptors nearly mounted a comeback. And this is not the first time in the last 2 weeks or so where Fred VanVleet has just not been at his best from a shooting standpoint. This season as a whole, he really isn't shooting the ball well. He's hovering around mid-30s in terms of his field goal percentages, and that is just not good. On his drives, he's shooting 35%, and of players who shoot as much as Fred VanVleet does with a certain amount of volume, he's the worst in the league on shooting on drive. So obviously that is a big concern for the Toronto Raptors. And in general, well, I think overall his effectiveness as a player has just been down compared to last season, where he was excellent. He was an all-star last season. He more than deserved to be on the all-star team. And a large part of that was his shooting. And when he's shooting the ball well, it really unlocks other parts of his game. But more importantly, it's essential to the success of this Raptors team. It's been built here with two-way athletic players, but it hasn't been built with a ton of shooters. So Gary Trent and Fred VanVleet are the players that we lean on very heavily to create the floor spacing for the Raptors. And if one of them, and sometimes this season both of them, aren't doing that, the floor spacing can become a big problem for this team. That was highlighted yesterday, especially in the third quarter of that game against the Boston Celtics. And beyond the shooting, I think the passing, the playmaking hasn't quite been as good. He doesn't look as athletic. I felt like the defense still has been good. Fred is always near the top of the league in deflections, and that's because he's very good with his active hands. He's one of the best point of attack defenders in the NBA. Like, he's a very good defender, an important part of the team in that respect. But offensively, he's absolutely been letting the team down this season. And, just by watching it, you can tell if you dive into, the statistics and averages on the season, it's very plain for the eye to see with Fred VanVleet. And that's an important thing that we're going to also touch on as we get throughout this video. But yesterday in particular, the Raptors lose by 6 to the Boston Celtics. The game as a whole here, I'll link my post-game show if you want to go check that out for my full thoughts on this game. But essentially, the Raptors have a good game here. They nearly get over the line late in the game. They nearly make that comeback to win the game here. A Gary Trent blown layup, a Fred VanVleet wide open three missed, 2 OG Anunoby turnovers of passes that slip right through his hands, some missed free throws. All things considered here, the Raptors played the Celtics extremely well in this game. They fall apart in the third quarter defensively. They don't really get any shooting in the third quarter, which allows the Celtics to clog up the paint, making life difficult for every player, including Siakam. Now, Siakam is he's a baller. He's a hooper, so he gets his points anyway. But for other guys in the team, they really struggled there. Fred VanVleet was an issue there because his shooting was really bad. You didn't have OG Anunoby supplementing that as usual. Gary Trent was shooting the ball really well, but was underplayed in large stretches of the game here by Nick Nurse, especially in that third quarter. But I think the biggest thing that Raptors fans are going to want to highlight here for this game is that if Fred VanVleet shoots the ball well and has a good game offensively, the Raptors win this game. And that makes sense. Sure, if Fred VanVleet shows up, then yeah, the Raptors probably do win this game. I will try to remind you guys that there's been a lot of games throughout even this season and last season where Fred has bailed out people who have played poorly. This one, the Raptors didn't quite get that from a lot of players, but I feel like for Fred VanVleet, this game in general, the Raptors played against the best team in the NBA. They were missing 2 pretty key players in Al Horford and Malcolm Brogdon. I understand that, but this is a very well-oiled machine in the Boston Celtics. Just everybody has a job offensively, and if one guy's not doing something, then another guy is doing something really well offensively. Like, they're 20-5 for a reason. They're on pace to not only have the greatest offensive rating in NBA history, they're on pace to shatter, absolutely blow the offensive rating record out of the water for points over 100 possessions, which has hovered around 120 so far this season, which is just absurd what this team is accomplishing. So losing by 6 to the Celtics, like, that's not like the panic sort of loss that I'm been seeing everywhere. But, you know, the Fred thing, it's been a theme over the last 2 weeks that he has not been playing well, not been shooting the ball well. And I think criticism is justified here, but the extent of the criticism is very unfair. And I think the reason for that is the Raptors, like I said earlier, have constructed a roster that is very much lacking floor spacers and is very much lacking shooters. We rely very heavily on VanVleet and Gary Trent, who last season were absolutely exceptional three-point shooters. Like, Fred VanVleet in particular was an exceptional three-point shooter. He is one of the least open players in the NBA and makes some of the most three-pointers and the most difficult three-pointers in the NBA. Now, we haven't quite seen that this season, but it's very easy to see when Fred VanVleet is not having a good game on offense, because you can just go to the box score, you can just look at statistics, the field goal percentages, super easy to see. Like yesterday, Fred VanVleet shoots 1 for 6 from 3. Very easy that when I look at the box score, you know, I could also watch the game, but very easy to see that's not a good game for him because he's doing that. But there's other parts of the game, like things that happened yesterday, that you just can't quite pick out from a box score that aren't being talked about as much. Like the fact that Scottie Barnes was an absolute disaster on defense. Now, not to just try to single him out here, this video is not about him, but just a point in particular where the Raptors lose this game is the third quarter, where the Celtics just ran over our defense. Jason Tatum had 17 in the third quarter alone compared to the Raptors team total in the third quarter, which was 18. A large reason for that was, number one, Nick Nurse putting Scottie Barnes on Jason Tatum, which was a mistake, not putting OG there. And number two, Scottie Barnes was like a pylon when anybody would set a screen against him. He refused to fight through screens. It allowed for easy buckets at a consistent rate for the Boston Celtics in that third quarter. And that was a large contribution to the eventual demise of the Raptors, who couldn't quite overcome that comeback they needed as a result of getting outscored in the third quarter, 35-17. Now, obviously, I think the biggest factor here is that the Fred shooting was a problem, but my argument is that it's very easy to pick that out and more difficult to pick out other things that go wrong for this team in general. Now, I'm not saying that Fred VanVleet wasn't the reason, or a big part of the reason why the Raptors lose this game. I'm just trying to put into context that I think that the state of the Fred VanVleet criticism that I'm seeing online is going a little bit too far. It's blown a little bit out of proportion, and a lot of it to me is just unjustified. The reality is Fred is a very important part of this team, and he has shown that this season. I think the last 2 weeks, we've really seen him at his worst. Maybe, I don't know, I don't think it's a health thing. I just think this is a player who's a little bit down on confidence, who maybe has lost a step from last season due to all the injuries that he was dealing with, due to all the playtime that he has been getting. And as far as the playtime goes, that's very much a Nick Nurse thing, and you shouldn't be placing that on Fred VanVleet, which I have been seeing a lot. Gary Trent was underused, and I feel like Fred probably could have given the ball more to OG, but I also feel like the sets could have been run more for OG. I'm not saying Fred VanVleet hasn't been bad. I'm just saying I don't think he's been as bad as people are making it out to be, to the point where some people are very desperate to replace him. And some people are questioning if Fred VanVleet is the right player for this young core going forward. Now, with that conversation, I think it's a fair question to ask. Is this the right point guard for our team? And obviously, as any player on the team, I don't think any player on the team is untouchable. If Scottie Barnes, who I'm very, very, very against trading, as you would know if you watch the videos on this channel, you offer me Giannis, no problem. Yeah, we're doing that trade, but you're not. That's very unrealistic, of course. It's just an example. Nobody is untouchable, absolutely untouchable on this team. Fred VanVleet is far from untouchable, in my opinion. But you have Fred VanVleet right now on an expiring contract, because he's not going to take that player option at the end of the season. You have him on an expiring contract. What sort of value do you think we could get for him? Because the Raptors are already extremely thin in the point guard position, and that's the reason why we didn't go to other point guards in this game against the Celtics, because you could have brought in Banton or Flynn, but that sheer drop-off of defense by doing that would have killed this team. And Fred, despite the bad shooting, has been fine on defense, in my opinion. More than fine on defense, in my opinion. I think the criticism for his defense yesterday is just people wanting to gang up on him, because he was fine from a defensive standpoint, in my opinion, yesterday. Of course, everything on this channel is my opinion, so I don't need to say that. So Fred in general, point guard wise, we're thin. And I've already explained to you how thin we are in the shooting and floor spacing department, especially with Otto Porter Jr. out with injury. So if you want to replace Fred here, you have a lot to replace. You have to get a good defensive point guard, one who can handle the ball, and one who can shoot the ball really well. Now, sure, there's plenty around the league who can do that. Very difficult to get in this sort of trade here. The Raptors, I don't think, are in a position right now to really downgrade in this point guard position too much. Like, it's very clear that we're lacking in shooting and in the point guard position. So trading him away, you'd have to get quite a haul in return to make that actually worth it. Like I said, I'm not against trading him, but you got to get a really good return or you are going to make your team worse by making this trade. So as far as what you could actually get for him, I don't think there's a lot out there that actually makes this team better when you consider the fact that he is on an expiring contract. And that expiring contract is a topic of discussion as well because he's going to want a good amount of money at the end of the season. Now, there's a long season left, and it's confusing to me why there's all this ganging up on Fred VanVleet. Like, I think the people that are really on top of Fred, ganging up on him and getting so mad about his performances, I think these are the same people that were begging the Raptors last offseason, 2 off seasons ago, to trade Pascal Siakam. And even at the start of the season, after watching Scottie Barnes' great start to the season, there were all these allegations that Siakam made the team worse. He made Scottie Barnes worse, that he doesn't fit with the team anymore. And, oh my goodness, has Pascal Siakam beaten those allegations? Why are we not affording Fred VanVleet the opportunity to beat these allegations as well when not even 1 year ago, this guy was playing in an NBA All-Star game? He is clearly a great player, and I think the Raptors need defense in that position, which he provides. He's an excellent defender, though he's undersized, and maybe that limits him a little bit. He's an excellent shooter of the ball. We're just not seeing him at his best this season. Decision-making, I think it's good, but I think on drives, it definitely could be a little bit better. Sometimes he bites off a little bit more than he can chew, going to the rim. He's always struggled to shoot at the rim, so take less of them. And this season, you can look at the stats. He has taken less shots, but maybe even more so. Maybe try to get other players a little bit more involved. I think he's doing that this season compared to last season, but I'd like to see him do it even more. So as far as Fred in general, I'm going to give him the same treatment I gave to Scottie Barnes in the video I did last week and Gary Trent, the video I did 2 weeks ago, where I spoke ill of the players, but ultimately, I propose time. I propose patience because these guys have done a lot for the franchise in the last year. They're clearly very good players, and they are important players to what I do. And I will stress, like, nobody on this team is untouchable. If you provide a really good offer, then you need to take that. But I think the Raptors will very much struggle to get the value back in a Fred VanVleet trade that they would get from simply having Fred VanVleet and trying to get him out of this slump and wait him out of this slump. I think, again, going back to the key point here, I think it's very easy to just look at the shooting numbers and say Fred VanVleet's playing bad without also addressing the other things that have been going wrong for the Raptors. And, you know, that I guess that does make sense. And you know what? Maybe the shooting thing is the biggest thing because we're so focused on the offense and in a very offensive-driven league here. But I see no reason why a player as talented as Fred can't bust out of this slump and become the player that we need him to be on this team. We need it ASAP, and in the times like where he is really struggling, like yesterday, can we go to other players on the bench more often? I think that's definitely a conversation that needs to be had, but that's more in relation to Nick Nurse. Fred VanVleet, I believe, will get out of this slump. I believe that there should be faith in Fred VanVleet's ability and his game. I have a ton of faith in him, and if you don't, I really think that you should, because this is a player that's been an important part of this franchise, has been an all-star, has stolen a finals MVP vote away from a guy who had one of the greatest NBA playoff and final performances of all time. And I think that's worth acknowledging. That's a long time ago, but the all-star performance isn't, and the importance of this player to this team should not be understated. Contract value, worry about that when you see more of him. Right now, obviously, is kind of tanking his value, but there are plenty of games to go in this season. So if you guys enjoyed what I had to say in this video, please make sure you drop a like and consider subscribing for more NBA content with a focus on the Raptors just like this. Help me on the road to 13,000 subs when I get there by the end of 2022. And I'll see you again tomorrow for the Raptors stream or on Thursday for our next video.